Welcome to this explainer. Whatever new government tax regulations drop, I know there's this immediate collective wave of anxiety that just ripples across the business community. You start wondering, right? Is my business going to survive this? Are my taxes literally about to double? Well, take a breath, because today we're looking specifically at the Indonesian government regulation number 20 of 2026, which updates the older 2022 rules. And I want to immediately reassure you right out the gate. That beloved 0.5% MSME tax rate, that flat, simple rate we all know and love, it is absolutely not dead. However, the bouncer at the door of this exclusive club, yeah, they just got incredibly strict. So let's dive into this and unpack exactly what's changed, who makes the cut, and who is officially out.
So here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll establish the 0.5% baseline. Then we'll look at the great purge of who actually makes the cut. After that, we'll reveal a brand new unlimited timeframe for individuals, examine the major crackdown on family loopholes, and finally, face the new reality for digital creators. Let's get into it.
All right, starting off with Section 1, the 0.5% tax evolution, and looking at our baseline. Okay, so when regulatory tectonic plates shift like this, it's absolutely crucial to first find some solid ground. And our solid ground is this golden number right here, 4.8 billion rupiah. Just like it was in the older Regulation 55 of 2022, the threshold for the 0.5% final income tax rate has stayed exactly the same. So if your business's gross turnover, meaning your total revenue before deducting a single expense, is equal to or less than 4.8 billion rupiah in a year, you're fundamentally looking at the right tax bracket. The government hasn't taken this tariff away. It really remains a comforting constant. The formula is still just 0.5% times your gross turnover. It's simple, it's clean, and it's highly beneficial. But here's the thing. The catch isn't the number anymore. It's the gatekeeping around who gets to use it. Which brings us to Section 2, who makes the cut? Or, as I like to call it, the Great Purge. I literally call this part the Great Purge because while that 4.8 billion rupiah limit stayed exactly the same, the list of who actually gets to use it, well, it has been ruthlessly trimmed down. Just look at the stark contrast between the past and the future here. Under the old 2022 rules, the 0.5% club was this big, welcoming tent. You had individual taxpayers, cooperatives, limited partnerships or CVs, firmas, ordinary limited liability companies or PTs, and even village-owned enterprises. Super inclusive, right? Now check out the new 2026 regulation. The list is tiny. It's been refined down to literally just 3 subjects: individual taxpayers, individual companies, which, by the way, is a specific legal entity for a single founder, and cooperatives. That's the whole shebang. The government has become incredibly selective. So the crucial takeaway here is this: CVs and ordinary PTs have completely lost their eligibility for the 0.5% facility. No way around it. And honestly, this is a massive shock to the system for corporate entities. If you run a standard PT with multiple shareholders or a CV, you have been purged from this specific microenterprise tax rate under the new rules. You're now going to be subject to the standard corporate income tax rates regardless of whether your turnover is under that 4.8 billion rupiah mark. The government is essentially saying, look, if you have the sophistication to run a standard corporate entity, you really don't need the training wheels of the 0.5% final tax anymore. Moving on to Section 3, unlimited time for individuals. And this is the reward part. We're kind of shifting gears here because hidden within all this stringent new regulation is actually a massive reward. In the past, the 0.5% rate was basically a ticking clock. It was always meant to be temporary. Under the old rules, ordinary PTs had 3 years, CVs had 4 years, and individual taxpayers had 7 years before they were just kicked off the facility and forced onto normal tax bookkeeping. But look at these new 2026 limits. Since corporate entities are removed entirely, their clocks are just gone. But for the individual taxpayer, the solo entrepreneur running a local shop or a small trade, that 7-year expiration timer has been completely abolished. You now have an unlimited duration to use the 0.5% rate, as long as your turnover stays under 4.8 billion rupiah. I mean, this is a monumental win for individual grassroots entrepreneurs. All right, let's look at Section 4, closing the family loophole. This is where the crackdown happens. So to balance out that generosity we just talked about, the tax authorities are actively hunting down those who abuse the system. Think of your business revenue like a giant pie, right? In the past, people realized that if they baked one massive pie, the taxman would tax it pretty heavily. But if they sliced that pie into smaller pieces and put them on different plates, the tax office might just see several small, tax-friendly pies. Well, the government calls this splitting entities. It's the practice of artificially dividing a single, highly profitable business into multiple smaller, legal entities solely to ensure that none of them ever cross that 4.8 billion rupiah threshold. The whole goal of entity splitting is to just hoard the 0.5% tariff indefinitely across a massive total revenue pool. Well, Regulation 2020-26 introduces aggressive anti-splitting measures to stop this dead in its tracks.
Let's break down exactly how they're identifying this. The new regulation sets up some very strict family aggregation triggers. Basically, the tax office is putting family businesses under a massive microscope. Let's say a husband has a personal business, and the wife decides to legally separate her assets, or maybe she operates her own distinct business, or perhaps founds her own individual company. Historically, these might have been treated completely independently, but not anymore. Notice this huge paradigm shift. The old view assessed the husband and wife's entities completely separately against that 4.8 billion limit. So it was super easy to have a husband making 4 billion and a wife making 4 billion, and they're both enjoying the 0.5% rate, even if they were essentially running the exact same family enterprise. The new view is drastically different. The Directorate General of Taxes will now aggregate, meaning they will add together the total turnover of these family businesses if they determine there's a substantive economic connection. So suddenly, that husband and wife are viewed as having an 8 billion rupiah turnover combined. That instantly pushes them over the limit and strips them of the 0.5% facility. And finally, Section 5, the digital creator reality. Now, you might be wondering, what about the modern workforce? The government is actually acutely aware of how the economy has digitized, and tax codes are evolving to capture these new giants of industry. So where do the influencers, the bloggers, the vloggers, and the content creators making a living on YouTube, TikTok, or Instagram fit into all of this? I mean, you might be working straight out of your bedroom, technically as an individual taxpayer, and making well under 4.8 billion rupiah. So do you get that sweet unlimited 0.5% rate? Well, the regulation actually addresses you directly. To understand the answer here, we really have to look at the legal definition of free work, or pekerjaan bebas. Tax law defines free work as independent professional services that aren't tied to a formal employment relationship. Traditionally, this category was strictly reserved for highly specialized independent professionals. Think doctors, lawyers, actuaries, consultants. They've always been excluded from the 0.5% micro-business rate because they sell specialized skills, not trade goods. And this brings us to the harsh reality for the modern digital economy. Digital creators are now firmly and explicitly excluded from the 0.5% MSME rate. It's true. The new regulation formally categorizes influencers, content creators, bloggers, and vloggers as engaging in free work. The logic here is that just like a lawyer uses legal expertise to provide a service, a content creator relies on specialized digital media skills and a personal brand to generate their income. Therefore, to make sure things are fair across all professional service categories, digital creators have to use standard progressive income tax calculations, not that flat 0.5%. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a really critical question to chew on. Is your business structured for the past or for the future? Government Regulation 2026 is sending a crystal clear signal. The days of easily hiding behind a CV or endlessly splitting your family business into tiny pieces to avoid graduating to normal tax brackets, those days are over. The government is offering incredible, unlimited support to genuine, single-entity microbusinesses, while firmly closing the door on corporate entities and independent professionals. So take a really hard look at your legal structure today, because the tax landscape of tomorrow has officially arrived. Thanks so much for joining me to figure all this out, and I strongly encourage you to review your specific situation with a tax professional. Keep learning and stay ahead of the curve.